go. Almost. All right, looks like we are live. Welcome, everyone. Late start tonight, just trying to minimize some of the background noise that we had here tonight. So, late start. So, tonight we're going to talk about criticisms and judgment, how to combat those, and what you can do as you're going through your healing journey. So, if this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I help people go from being in a dark, depressed, anxious state to being more happy. And I do this by sharing my personal experience, my tips, tools, tricks that I use on a daily basis to kind of get through these challenging times. So, tonight we're going to dive into dealing with criticisms and judgments. So first of all, a lot of we can receive criticism and judgments from other people that starts affecting us, and it starts playing on us as we're going through life, right? You get told things enough times and you start to believe those negative things. And especially if those negative things were programmed into us from childhood. Um, so if we were told that we were clumsy all the time, then we start to develop a belief that we are clumsy and accident prone and stuff like that. And I had a coworker that I worked with, and he really embodied this whole belief that he was clumsy and he was accident prone, and he was always having to fill out accident reports at work. There was always some sort of mishap, crazy mishap that happened. And I know with talking with him a few times that he had talked about how, in childhood he was always made fun of and ridiculed for these kind of things. And this kind of ended up becoming part of his identity. This was just the way it was, right? And that is one of the things that is furthest from the truth. We are able to change anything that we choose to. Doesn't mean it's going to be an easy change. Sometimes these things can be extremely difficult, especially if it's long ingrained programming from the past. So going through this process can be multiple layers. First of all, I want you to understand that it can be multiple layers, and you could go along pretty good for a while, that you kind of get to some of the core roots, and then you might have another challenging situation that comes up in your life that causes you to have all of this stuff unearthed again. And this is where you get to do the next deeper layer. And it's actually, don't get discouraged if you're like, oh man, I thought I was done with this. Why do I have to deal with this again, right? And it's just a signal that you are actually ready to deal with this again. You are ready to go to a deeper level and do more healing. Now, it doesn't always feel good when you're going through this kind of stuff. And you might be judging and criticizing yourself. And those are actually the harder criticisms to overcome. So one of the things that I do when those judgments and criticisms come, so they might be initiated by somebody externally, and we end up taking those things on. And if you do take those things on, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up for that, because this is a signal that there's some work that needs to be done here, and learning how to process through that is going to be something that's really, really valuable for you, and not to run away from it, to actually sit with it, to try to understand it. What I want you to look for is when you're receiving these criticisms, whether it's externally or internally, you'll often find that they are phrased in the form of a statement. They are stated as if they were unrefutable fact. And those are the things that I want you to start turning into questions. So if somebody tells you that you are accident prone, or that you are clumsy, or that you are miserable, or that you are angry all the time. I want you to turn that statement into a question. Am I clumsy? Am I miserable? Am I irritable? Am I angry all the time? And it really takes some of the sting out of it, first of all, because now your brain's going to try and find evidence to either support or deny that. And more than likely, it's going to find examples to prove that that's not always the case. It's not an absolute. And if we don't question those statements, we take those on and we believe them as truths. And then when we believe those as truths, we start to operate in a way that that is true. And that's where these criticisms, these judgments can end up becoming self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That we end up feeling like there's nothing that we can actually do about it, that this is just the way it is, and that's not the case. So make sure that when somebody is criticizing you or judging you, that you are turning those statements of fact into questions and start to actually question those things and really sit with it. And if you do find that some of it you maybe agree with, it's like, oh yeah, in this particular case, you know what, I was pretty angry, or I wasn't my best self, and maybe you find certain reasons for why you're doing that. Pay attention to those things, and it's really important to pay attention to what led up to your behavior not being aligned with your best self, right? When you actually do that, then you can start to learn to recognize the early warning signs of when you are now heading down a path where you're going to behave in a way that you're not going to end up respecting yourself, and then you will start to believe that the statements that have been said about you are true. And then that is when the pain starts happening, right? Because now we're like, oh, okay, this is true, and maybe you're not ready to face that, right? And that's where you get into denial with that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but I wouldn't have done that if they hadn't have done this. And that may be the case, but it's a matter of understanding, why did you do those certain things? Why did you actually behave in that way? Hey, Jenny, are myself and Kirk over? I'm not sure, hun. So with going through criticisms, understanding what are they, give those fears a voice if you can. So writing those things down often helps so that you can externalize the negative criticisms or judgments that you're receiving. Getting an outside opinion as well. And then getting an outside opinion helps. Sorry, I had to block somebody. Um, Getting an outside opinion helps, especially if it's from a trusted friend that you know has your back. If you don't have those, then you have to, that's a sign that you actually have to become that and be your own trusted friend and start doing those kind of things for yourself, right? And as you're going through some of these criticisms or judgments that you've experienced, you may, in your recovery work, come across certain things, certain events, certain situations that you find that they may bring up a sense of sadness or grief or loss, because um, you may find that some of the things that other people were saying about you were actually really hurtful, and you have to actually look at that kind of stuff, and it's like you have to understand, why were they actually saying those kind of things, and And most of the time, it has to do with their pain, their issues, because hurting people will hurt people and they will lash out, they will do those kind of things, right? Um, but you have to allow yourself to grieve some of those little losses along the way of understanding that maybe a relationship that you thought was a certain way ended up not being the way that you thought it was. And having to face those things can bring up some sadness, can bring up some pain and loss and grief. And it's important to sit with those feelings, to honor those feelings within yourself. Oftentimes we're too quick to try and just move past that, get through it. Let's like, okay, oh, do I have to do the journal prompts? I do this, I do that. And there's no way around this. You have to actually go through this. You actually have to feel those feelings. So giving yourself that space to feel those feelings in a safe way, whatever way that feels for you. So if you need more space, then take more space. If um, you need to be around people that are comforting, then do that as well, right? Whatever it is that you feel you need for you is okay for you to do that. If you can't give yourself that permission, I want to give you that permission today so that you give yourself exactly what it is that you need. So if you need to eat your favorite comfort foods, then eat your favorite comfort foods. If you need to go outside, go for a walk. If you need to go do something to have fun or just read a book, whatever it is, allow yourself to give yourself the comfort that you need as you go through some of those grieving processes. And I would also recommend during this time not to make any major decisions. Okay? Um, don't, like, if you finally realize that maybe the relationship with a parent or a sibling wasn't as close as you thought it was, and you're feeling the pain of that, you're feeling the loss of the relationship you thought that you had, right? And when you feel that pain, you have to give yourself whatever space that you actually need to feel those feelings and to honor that. And also, don't react in that moment. Don't go and attack them. Don't go confront them. Don't go and try to fix years of damage all at once. Okay, especially if this has been something that's been a long-term thing. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to add fuel to the fire. Okay, and you have to be able to decide whether or not this relationship is worth saving or salvageable, or maybe it has to be put in a different category and you have to have a different understanding. Or maybe you have to say, you know what, this is absolutely not good for me. Maybe they're sorry. Maybe they feel a certain way, but you're not prepared to accept their apology, or you're not prepared to accept just letting bygones be bygones, right? Because you have to go through that pain. You have to actually feel those feelings around that, and that is okay. Take whatever space you need, take whatever circumstances you need to put yourself in for you to go through the healing work. And this doesn't mean it's going to be forever this way. Okay? Give yourself that permission so that you can actually do this, right? And this can be really, really hard. It can be really, really hard. You're thinking like, wow, I thought that person was my best friend. And after all of this time, this is what happened, right? And you have to feel that feeling of betrayal and loss and sadness. And And it's okay. And don't go out trying to label them as narcissists or try to figure out why they did the certain things that they did. I'm so sorry, Jenny, that you feel that he broke you. And that's okay to feel broken, right? It's okay to feel that way. Um, and just know that these feelings will pass. You can do this healing work to actually get to where you feel whole again. And it can be a challenging process. I'm not going to lie, it can definitely be a challenging process, especially when you're in the middle of it. But one of the things that I recommend is just don't stop, keep moving forward, and just really be gentle with yourself during this process, right? Um, it can be it seems to be the theme tonight. It can be hard. It can be hard dealing with those criticisms and judgments and everything. But the stuff is, it isn't what the other people have said about us that actually causes us the pain. Because people can talk shit about us all day long, and they can tell us, well, we're a purple unicorn, or you're a skinny bitch, or you're a fat bitch, or whatever it is that is opposite of you. And you could be like, what? What's wrong with you? Like, are you blind? This is not true. Like, certain things to be true or not true about yourself. And the ones that actually hurt are the ones that we actually agree with. So this is where the inner work needs to be done. And we need to, whether that is been programming from the past, from our childhood, from a spouse or a friend or whatever, right? Wherever that original wound came from, because it's not just isolated to childhood. Um, it's just the childhood ones are sometimes harder to pick up on because up until the age of 7, it's just like hard coded programming into your subconscious. You don't get a chance to filter it. You don't get a chance to be able to logically question whether or not that's a truth or not. You just accept it as fact. So whatever statements are spoken over you, whatever, if you're more on the spiritual, it's like curses, right? If somebody criticizes you, labels you, tells you, oh, you're shy, you're timid, you're this, you're that. Those are all programming. They're all curses. They're all statements of fact that are not true. These are lies that are actually spoken over you. You can be a lot of different things. That may be somebody else's observation, but if those things were spoken over you as a child, you didn't actually have a choice as to whether or not you could accept that, unless somebody actually pointed out that that's not true, right? Unless somebody took the time and pointed out that that's not true, and it's okay for you to be you, that that is a true gift, right? Because that gives you, as a child, the ability to question, yeah, whether it's unattractive, maybe somebody, like growing up, people used to say that freckles weren't attractive, and some of my best friends, they had freckles, and I loved the look of their skin, their freckles and everything. And myself, I had a lazy eye, so they'd fix one eye and then the other one would go. And for a lot of times as a kid, I had to run around with like an eye patch on up until like grade 5 was my last surgery. And then I had another one in 2011 as an adult once I figured out that, oh, you can actually get this done, because it was considered a cosmetic surgery and therefore not relevant, which I think has a lot of psychological um, challenges with it, because I don't know. Back in the day, I remember Oprah did this thing with an interview where they were testing female contestants, where they had to go, they were more than qualified, they were confident about their abilities, they knew that they are a slam dunk to be able to get the job. But before the interview, what they did is they had the cosmetics, the makeup team, put a prosthetic of a big scar on their face and then showed it to them. And they're like, oh my God, this looks terrible and I look horrible and all those kind of things. And then just before they went into the interview, the makeup artist said that they needed to do a touch up and they actually removed the scarring so that there was nothing on their face. But they didn't know that. They didn't see that. And they went into the interview believing they had this horrendous scar on their face and they bombed the interview. And that is pretty telling as to how impactful our belief system, even if it's not true, even if it's not true, if we believe into those lies, we believe into those judgments, criticisms, or statements that are spoken over us, that we will start behaving in a way to bring ourselves into alignment with our beliefs. This is why it's so important to do this inner work. And this applies not only to our personal lives, this applies to our relationships, this applies to our family situations, this applies to our business. Imagine you're a business owner and think to yourself, you know what? People are just so friggin' lazy these days. They're not productive, da 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 da. Guess what? You are now speaking that over your staff. You are basically cursing your team, your employees, and you will start operating in a way that is in alignment with those beliefs. That you will believe that you can't find good help, people are just terrible, they're lazy, they're stupid, they're this, they're that, any of those kind of things. If you speak that, you are speaking that into existence, into your reality. That you can't find closers that close, you can't find admin that do the work properly and they're always making mistakes and all of that kind of stuff. Here's what I want you to do, that if you find yourself in a place where you are being harsh, you are being critical, you are being judgmental, what I want you to do is write down all of those statements, because I can promise you those are not being phrased as a question, number one. So if you turn that around, number one, and start to phrase all of your statements as questions. Are my team lazy? Is it impossible to find good help? Does everybody just want a handout? Ask it as a question rather than as a statement of fact, because you will force yourself to come into alignment with your beliefs. Why? Because our brains don't want us to think that we're fucking crazy, right? So we will start to, if we tell ourselves that this is something that is real, then we will start to behave like it is real. And so this is one of the things I had to catch myself in today, where I was the one that was being critical. I was the one that was being judgmental. Now, this was against myself. It wasn't against others. And I had to stop myself and I had to actually rephrase those statements as questions. And I had to really look at those things. And as soon as I phrase them as a question, now my mind is much more open. My mind will now start searching for possibilities. Is this true? Is this not? It will start weighing evidence and it will start looking for the truth, the true truth, instead of accepting that blanket statement, that criticism, that judgment as fact. And going through this, I've been doing this for such a long time. I often don't write some of this stuff down anymore. Before, I used to have to write it down because I needed to externalize it. I needed to look at it, and I needed to actually put some space. So I would write all the criticisms down, and then I would give a little bit of time. I would go do something else. I would go, fold laundry, do some sort of mundane activity, and then I would come back to it. And oftentimes I'd be like, okay, wow, You can see it for the emotional reaction that it is, right? It's not a truth, it's not real. And you can see it as a fear, a false evidence appearing real. And you can put it in its proper perspective when you do that, right? The next thing I want you to do, so phrase it as a question, obviously. The next thing would be to write all of those things down, all those negativities down of everything that the other person is doing wrong. Okay? My best friend never calls me. My, sibling never takes my side, right? Blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is that you have, write those criticisms down, and I call this taking somebody else's inventory. You're taking stocks of their bad behaviors, and oh, they don't take things seriously, and they're not good at financial planning, and they're this and they're that, and da 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 da. Write everything down. Don't hold anything back. And now, what I want you to do is take that list, and for the next week, you're not going to criticize anybody else. You're going to focus on where are these behaviors evident in my life. Now, granted, their volume might be at a 10, yours might be at a 2. But I can promise you there's an area of, say you say they're not taking things seriously. They just think this is all fun and games, and they're not taking things seriously. I want you to scan through your life. What is something in your life that you're not taking as seriously as you should be, right? As you know that you need to do more work in this area, but you've been avoiding it. You've been delaying it. You've been putting it on the back burner. I'm going to get around to that, right? I can promise you, you do this a few times in a row, and you're not going to be so quick to judge others. You're not going to be so quick with those criticisms and those those ways of forming opinions about other people's behavior. Why? Because you got too much shit on your own plate to be dealing with, and you can't actually you don't take the time. It's like, I don't have time to deal with your stuff. I don't have time to look at whether or not you're doing things right, because I got this whole laundry list over here that I'm working on myself because my shit's a mess and I have to clean this up. And I promise you, if you get in the habit of doing this a few times, you'll have zero judgments, zero criticisms of other people. Now, that doesn't mean you can't actually speak up when you see behavior that is incorrect, or you see behavior that is deliberately harmful. That is where you can speak up. But here's the rule of thumb that I use, is that I will speak my truth once and then let it go. I've said my statement, I've said it clear, I've said it, and I've opened up conversation. So I've said, hey, I don't think this is right. I speak in I statements when I do this. I don't speak in a way that belittles the other person, but I will say very clearly, no, I don't think this is right, and I think this is why I don't think this is right. And they're free to agree, to disagree. Oftentimes I get attacked back and they get butthurt about things, and that's okay. They're allowed their feelings for it. I don't retaliate. I don't try to fight that stuff back. I don't get into an argument over it and try to prove why my viewpoint is right, because I am still open to the possibility that I might be wrong. I might not be seeing it 100% clearly. There may be more information that I haven't received that would actually change my opinion about the situation. And I am 100% okay with receiving that information and changing my opinion. It's like, oh, well, shit, I didn't know. Here, I thought you were being this way because of this reason, and I didn't know that you were going through all of this other stuff. I'm really sorry. I wish you had told me. I would have been much more supportive, would have been understanding of that. I would have given you more space, more time, more this, more that, right? Whatever it is, right? So, understanding those kind of things. So when you are dealing with your criticisms of other people, because we all have them, maybe it's like, hey, and it could be a short thing too. You could be out driving and some idiot cuts you off, and you're like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. Pay attention to what the hell you're doing, right? And it's like, first of all, know that that's a fear reaction, that it triggered the fight or flight response in you, and stay calm, no road raging, no road raging, and then also pay attention and give grace for the times where you weren't paying attention when you were driving, right? That you were lost in thought, you were, focused on something else, right? And we all have those abilities, those capacities. So understanding that and bringing that to the situation. So when you are in this critical mode, number one, phrase it as a question. Number two, take that inventory list of writing down all of the things that you find unacceptable about them. Now, some of these things might be true, and you're like, you know what? These are absolutely unacceptable to me, and they keep friggin' doing it. I've spoken my truth once, and they keep doing these things. And that doesn't mean um, if time goes by and it comes up again, that you can't restate the original thing. What you're trying to avoid is getting into that argument of why you're right and they're wrong kind of thing. You don't want to do that. You want to always be open to additional information, that there might be more or a different perspective, a different way of looking at it that may not, that may reduce the criticism or judgment that you have about the situation. You'll be much more open and amicable to finding a solution that works for both of you. And this is where collaboration, cooperation, all of that kind of stuff, compromise, because sometimes you might be like, okay, well, maybe nobody's wrong here, right? Maybe you just both want different things. It's like, okay, say you're arguing about eating healthy, right? And you're like, no, I want chicken and salad, and that's what I want for dinner. And they're like, but I am dying for a juicy burger and fries, right? And it's like, I've been really good, and I really want this. And the other person's like, no. So you have to find this compromise, this balance, without being critical and going, oh, you're always eating this terrible food and you're the reason why I can't stick to my diet and blah, 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 all of these kind of things, right? You're like, okay, you want a juicy burger, I want chicken and salad. Can we find some place that we can get both things? And that way we're both happy, right? So you find some sort of compromise instead of launching into a criticism as to why that, they're they're the bane of your existence, whatever it is, right? That's not easy to do, especially if there's a buildup of things that you haven't actually been speaking about. You haven't been speaking your truth for quite a while. So now there's a bunch of resentments that are piled up, and it's very difficult to see things clearly. This is why you have to write those criticisms down, take that inventory list, and then you work on those things. Finding out, where am I, like, so for the example of, like, you're the reason why I can't stick to my diet. Okay, you're the reason why I can't stick to my diet. Write that down. It's like, okay, I'm the reason why I can't stick to my diet. Why is that? Oh, okay, I'm being critical with myself. I'm being hard on myself. I'm not being forgiving when I make mistakes. I'm, uh, you know, setting my expectations too high and I'm making these impossible standards, and that if I fail at this, I am a terrible person. So now you've got criticism and judgment rather than, oh, I made a mistake. I really shouldn't have had those French fries with the chicken, and I should have went for the salad or something like that. Whatever it is, right? I'm just trying to give that as a tangible example, right? It's not just about the food stuff, right? Um, Whatever it is, taking a look at where am I doing that. So now you have to find ways to not be so hard on yourself about things, to give yourself the grace and compassion that you're expecting from other people that are not giving it to you, right? When we start to do that and we start to basically let it begin with me, and we do that for ourselves, other people start to treat us the way that we're treating ourselves. So if we're treating ourselves like shit, that we have no value, that we're not worth making the changes for, we're not worth um, living a better life, then people will treat us like that. Why? Because they are reflecting how we're feeling about ourselves. So when these external criticisms come up for us, when we can get to the point where we can actually embrace those things, and I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, sometimes it does, it really stings when these things come up. But the only way to remove that sting is to look at what's going on within us, that we believe that to be true. And then if it is true, is this something we want to keep because it works for us and we're okay with this? And now their criticism, their judgment actually doesn't friggin' matter, and we can ignore it because it's like, you know what? I think your way of living is stupid and I'm not going to fucking do it. Right? It's like, no, I don't want to live that way. No, I don't want to do that thing. No, that's not important to me right now. Maybe in a year it might be, right? Whatever. You are allowed to decide what is good for you, what is not good for you. And just because the rest of the world says it should be this way, you are allowed to march to the beat of your own drum. You are allowed to go a different path, a road less traveled. You are allowed to do that for you. If that is the path that you are called to, you feel like you need to go down, then you have my permission, if nobody else has told you, that you can do things differently from other people if that is what works for you. And if it doesn't work, or if it works for right now, and maybe down the line you find that it's not working anymore, guess what? You're allowed to change. You're allowed to do things differently. You're allowed to go a different way, different path. This, when we start living this way, this is where we are able to find happiness. And I'm not talking about happiness where you're like, glassy eyed, drank the Kool-Aid kind walking around. Now you might be, but as you're going through some of the healing stuff, it's okay to feel um, those sadnesses, those griefs, those many losses along the way, right? When the realities that you thought were solid, um, and you end up seeing that the illusion of them, it can be disheartening. But understanding what is the lesson behind it, what is the value out of knowing that. And while it can be painful, it can also be liberating to kind of look at things and kind of go, huh, well, shit, that actually sucks. But now that I'm seeing things clearly, I can choose to do things differently. And what did I learn from it? How can I move forward from this? And instead of beating yourself up for not seeing things sooner, not doing things sooner, then phrase it as a question. Now that I know that, how can I do things differently? What would I do differently in this situation? Ask yourself questions. Don't make statements like, oh man, I was so stupid. I let myself get walked all over. I'm such a dummy, blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, don't do that to yourself. It's not helpful. It's not useful for you. And it just reinforces the punishment. So if you catch yourself making statements about yourself, I want you to turn them into questions. Okay? So, um, and it's okay if you do this, even if it's something that is a positive. It's like, I'm a friggin' awesome person. Am I an awesome person? Well, yeah, I'm an awesome person because I've done this and this and this and that. Right? Now, somebody else might come up behind you. Yeah, you're a piece of shit, though, because you did this. And you think that you're awesome. It's like, well, you're right, I did do that. And I'm still an awesome person. Right? So we have to start learning to become okay with the good and bad in all of us. And when we can be compassionate with our own darker side, with our own failings, our own shortcomings, our own criticisms that are earned, we can start um, changing those behaviors. And don't ever let anybody tell you that a leopard can't change their spots, or that, oh, you're a narcissist and you'll never change. It's like, no, that is the most disheartening thing. Imagine somebody who recognizes, they look at some of the stuff of what the narcissistic tendencies are, and they go, well, shit, I actually see myself in some of that. And then they hear that there's no changing them. They're hopeless. They're a terrible person. It's like, well, now you've spoken that curse over them. Are they a terrible person? Are they beyond help? Are they? Switch those statements into questions. Hey, Grace Strega, it's so good to see you. Thank you for popping in. I just want to say thank you because there's been many times I've listened to your lives when I was going through a tough time, and I just wanted to give you a shout out and say thank you for all those times that you went live, and I just sat there listening and tapping the screen, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the times that you shared your energy, shared your light. So thank you. Hey, Syed, good to see you. So turning criticisms into questions um, is one of the best things that I have found, especially when they're internal ones. It allows you to combat the lies that have been spoken over you, the lies that have been spoken over your life, and you can start to, I'm doing well, Saeed. It was a challenging day today, but doing better. I always feel better when I come on here, right? Because I get to talk through. It's like, how did I work through that challenging time? I get to see how to go through that. And it's like, oh, yeah, these are the tools that I use on a regular basis. These are the tools that I've used for a long time. Good morning. Yes, it's very late here. Well, technically it's morning because it's after midnight, but yeah. So, yeah, guys, I will be wrapping up now. So, Saeed, you can catch the replay on this. I will be uploading it to YouTube later. Okay, so if you guys have any questions or if you have any challenges and you would like me to do a training on that, let me know and I'd be happy to do up a training of different things. In the meantime, I will continue to share my experience, strength, and hope in order for you to gain some insight, some tools that you can start to use to combat some of the criticisms and judgments maybe that you've been facing, whether that's from internal or external forces, right? That there's ways around these things, and when we do this inner work, we not only make our own internal world a better place, we also make the external world a better place as well, because we now operate from a place of understanding, care, and compassion. And that, I think, contributes to the well-being of all people that surround us. So hopefully you guys found this helpful, and I will be back on again tomorrow night. So hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care, guys. Have a great night. Bye.